Welcome to our very first Waldner Academy event. My name is Alexander Biller, and I'm looking forward to share a lot of inspiration with you. What do we do with the Waldner Academy? Once a month, we are looking to new trends all around the world from different perspectives, from management view, from the view of an architect, but also from a scientific and lab user view. That can be visionary topics, but also insights from exciting projects. Our topic today is the future of labs, trends, insights, and best practice around the world. Our guests are my colleagues Lena and Max. They will talk about what are the top trends around the world. The second impulse should be Dr. Geo Adam, but he's so sorry. He called us this morning. He is a private thing. He's really sorry. But Achim Grenz from Roche will take his part. Thanks a lot, Achim. And the third impulse today is from my side. I will talk about how can we integrate the trends in our labs. So I would say, let's start. I hope everybody has a good cup of coffee in his hand. And then, Max, it's your turn.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. It's quite an honor. I'm standing in the middle of a lab, actually. I'll come to that, the why later and the how. But basically, the idea of the Academy was born a few months ago when we realized, look, we build so many labs worldwide. No one builds more labs than us in the grand scheme of things all around the globe. And there's so many learnings and so many lessons we take from there. That's why we wanted to take the chance on sharing this with you, our key partners, clients, and our audience, what we see around the world and how we can make and build, design better labs with the users in mind. Today, our slot will be very short because we wanted to place full attention on the actual topic from Roche. But as our host Alex mentioned, Lena and I will lead through our very small slot. Lena heads our global account management, and I'll take care of the global sales at Waldner. And if you look at scientific hotspots around the world, of course there is science everywhere, but there's really a few key areas where the magic happens, where there's lots of conglomerates that settle down, there's lots of universities, lots of research, lots of R&D going on, and clearly those are spots around the world that we see. That's also where we are. I myself, I'm based in Singapore, in one of the Asian capitals for science, and we would like to take you on a tour, basically around the world, where we touch on topics that have to do with how our projects in Australia, how might they be different to other projects around the world. We go all the way to Russia, where we touch on futuristic STEM labs and how science is taught today, how engineering is taught today in schools, early days, to, I guess, generate the scientific leaders of tomorrow. We'll jump to Asia, obviously, with lots of projects going on here. I'm standing in an incubator lab. Incubator is a good keyword because next month we'll speak about that very topic, how this is a very global trend at the moment where both universities as well as corporate institutions build incubators to foster R&D, to promote startups into labs, right? So they can't afford their own, let them move together, cross-pollinate, generate wealth and of science, I guess, globally. So I'm standing in the middle of one. We just handed over to the users, I think, 4 weeks ago. It was opened 2 weeks ago. So some very cool impulses next month on that topic. And obviously, today we jump into Switzerland, into Basel specifically, which is one of the epicenters of science in Europe, with Roche being one of the leading companies. Just had their 125th anniversary, and I'm very happy to have Achim on the call in the meeting today. We are touching, actually we work together on another accelerator program in Shanghai, so you can see there's a global connection there, and Roche is definitely building one of the coolest labs, for sure one of the biggest labs currently in Switzerland. So very looking forward to seeing some of those insights from you. Now, one thing I'd like to mention, this is and will not be a Waldner show. This is Waldner Academy, but we are inviting speakers. We are curating events around topics. And sometimes we might have something to say about those topics, and sometimes we might not. The key point is we're looking forward to working with experts from all around the world. We'll have speakers from Australia, from Cambridge, from the US, from different backgrounds, architects, designers, users, researchers, as today. So I'm very much looking forward to the next few months. You will see later there is a agenda already. We have some upcoming new academy events already going on. You can register later if you like. And I'd like to hand over to Lena quick, touching on some of those fields that we'd like to tackle in the next few weeks and months.
Just before we jump into the actual content, let me just very, very quickly express a huge thank you to the number of attendees from literally all continents around the world except from Antarctica, but there is so much interest in those topics, and for us it's just such a great honor to fuel that community of interested people in actually space design, lab of the future topics. And as Max already mentioned, we took quite some time to screen the global project portfolio landscape and also to deduct key drivers in order to be able, together with our key clients, but also with project partners around the world, to present over the upcoming months those Pearl projects on a monthly basis. And this is something which is super close to our heart. And right now, in the next couple of slides, we'll just very, very briefly give you an indication of what those topics from our point of view actually correlate with. So first of all, and I think this is a very clear and obvious topic, but ever since, and even more so in the last 1.5 years, we have seen that the world's basically is subject to very, very rapid change. We all experience COVID, we all experiencing natural disasters, so many changes that basically lead to a paradigm change in terms of how we set priorities, how we work, how we live. For instance, we've seen also in the last month that huge building programs were delivered for project stakeholders that are either not longer there or have very, very changed requirements. So this is the one side of the story, but on the other side, there are so many opportunities to rethink and to change methodologies of how to deliver projects, how to work online or remote, how to set priorities new, how to align teams more purpose-oriented. So this is a huge topic, and if we really come to the lab itself, we and our team basically came up with 4 key indicators where we say, okay, lab of the future is such a often used term, but what does it actually mean, and how can we really use that in order to break benchmarks and come up with new concepts that are basically leading into the future. So what we said, first of all, it is the workplace experience. The workplace needs to attract people. I think this is a very simple truth, which has been a given for offices and community spaces ever since, or at least for quite a long time, but not so much for labs actually. So what we see right now is that there are different factors that catalyze that development in order that companies focus much more on the workplace experience itself. And one aspect which really correlates with that is the question, who do we design the spaces for? So especially having in mind that facilities are designed for 20 years plus, and the millennials and the Generation Z basically makes up a large proportion of the workforce in future. It also changes the way how we basically work in those spaces. So instead of, for instance, instead of using equipment, instead of owning equipment, it's often a more commonly concept to share equipment. Also the question of how big do we need to design spaces? There are very interesting research conducted on the question of what number of people need to come together in a research environment in order to be the most innovative, to be the most creative. And this in very many ways contradicts how current facilities are being designed. So there's a huge bunch of topics around that, and we will really dedicate one session where we exclusively look at workplace experience and how different companies, small and big around the world, really tackle that project, who really ask the question, what are the colors of science? What are the material of science? What are the parameters that basically fuel that ecosystem of science? And there are fantastic projects which we are quite honored to have clients and partners presenting them. So this is a huge topic. Second of all, sustainability, and this is also a keyword or a buzzword which is quite commonly used. But for us, we also needed to incorporate it in that Lab of the Future topic, simply because it has such a great validity, as the square meter of lab basically makes up such a huge proportion of the energy consumption of a building portfolio, looking at the space indicator performance. So in the bundle of sustainability topics, obviously we will look at the ecological, but also at the economical and the social cultural aspects. And this is something which really changed in our point of view. The awareness that the initial invest costs are only a small percentage of the overall total building life cycle is a truth which has been there for quite a while. But the way how we assess projects, how clients assess projects simply changed due to that more consciousness also in society, looking at things and topics from a more abstract point of view, from a mid and long-term point of view. And globally seen, there are markets such as Singapore, where Max currently is, which lead that development at a much, much faster pace. So this is also a super interesting topic where smart concepts have been developed. The project here on the left-hand side, for instance, is from Italy, also very, very cool and much to talk about, but as I said, in a separate session. And then we will have lab digitalization and integration. This is basically on our agenda for April next year. Again, a topic of huge importance. We still see that there are so many non-paperless labs and so many data lacks which we have in labs, where users still don't have that environment of convenience as we would have in our homes or in other ecosystems. So there's much to do, but also a lot of changes and very interesting market trends. So again, the question of how we will basically capture data in a futuristic lab, and what does digitalization then in the end really mean, is also a interesting topic, and I do know that Achim will later on touch base on that topic as well. And then lastly, and this is for me, to be honest, one of the most important key drivers in that, it is the innovation ecosystem itself. And to very briefly touch on that, what it actually means is that the labs itself is core and important for lab facilities, obviously, but there's so much broader around that which needs to be considered. And Max earlier mentioned the topic incubators and accelerators. Also, that is a topic which goes hand in hand with the question of innovation ecosystems, and which we see in basically all markets from the United States over Central Europe to Asia. There are so many interesting incubators and accelerator concepts, but on the same time, the concept of global innovation centers, how basically corporates tackle the question of how to make research and innovation the easiest, the most productive. We will have examples here from Germany, but also from Scandinavia, looking at what does those clients do in order to have the most innovative research areas. And then also the question of what wider ecosystem in terms of campus facilities are currently really needed in order to attract the top talents around the world. So if a young scientist need to decide, okay, where do I go? What are the key drivers, except from the company, except from the lab itself? What are the key drivers to really fuel those innovation areas? And this also, to a certain extent, goes hand in hand what Max showed earlier with the innovation hotspot. So again, very important topic, and therefore we will dedicate an entire session for that one as well. So this was a very quick run through the topics, just to give you a rough indication on those. And what you see here in the slide is basically today we're on the entrance event, the kickstart. And we're so honored to have Achim, or we are so honored to have Achim in the call and giving basically a Roche view on global lab trends. This will be so interesting. And in the upcoming months, as I said, there are dedicated sessions for each of those topics. You're more than welcome to join those calls. Yeah, and basically then I'll directly hand over to Achim. Stage is all yours, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Lena. It's an honor to jump in here on little short notice. I did my very best to what Lena said is trying to give you a Roche view on how we approached one of our recent bigger projects. So I'm here for Geo. I'll a little bit of short notice. I'll do my best to cover that talk in a moment. So what defines the Lab of the Future? Lab of the Future has been a term. It's been out there for quite a while already. Lots of conferences is about, and what is lots of terminology around it. Lab of the Future, Future Lab, Lab 4.0. We've heard a lot. What I tried to do in a couple, let's say 15 minutes, is to give you an idea of how we approached it when we back in some couple of years back, we came to a project which this picture actually would sort of illustrate what we're doing. In our headquarters site in Basel of PIRET, that's one of the major research units of Roche, with close to 1,500, 2,000 researchers in research and early development. There was a decision made a couple of years back to refurbish almost the entirety of our lab infrastructure. And obviously that's a big project, building a new home for let's say 1,500 or 1,900 researchers in total, if you include it all, and that resulted in a plan for having those 4 buildings being newly built. And then you don't do that overnight, obviously, so the project started quite a while ago, basically in 2013 or 14 when we had the project initiation phase, and it will be completed only in 2024. This is when we move in to that project. Wrong direction. And one of the first things, Lena had it on her slide a minute ago, one of the first things when you start a project like this in 2013 is getting an idea of who is actually going to live there, who is going to work in there. And we looked at the graphs, we asked our HR system, can you make a little bit of a forecast of what the age range, what the generations are that will be working in that building? And obviously there's a significant shift here. So in 2013, most of us were Generation X, me included, by the way. But by the time in 2024, I call it minority, but I'm probably one of those phasing out in terms of the population that we have. So we're building for a group of people that are not us. And in 2013, there weren't that many of that generation around that we could ask. So That was one of the challenges that we had. And looking at this, it was absolutely clear we need to sort of evolve over time when we build and when we go through the different design processes, and bring in more and more and more of those with generation Y and those people that will be dominantly occupying the space we have. Now, we did so, and over the last, longer story short, over the last couple of years, we involved hundreds of people from our research community, giving us ideas and expectations, requirements, name it, what they want to see or what they want our new research home to be like. And that paired with all the legal requirements, compliance requirements, fire department rule, etc., all the obviously physical constraints you have when building a building, a high-rise building. That is kind of puzzling. I really want to focus on the what is the user aspect of it, and lots of it we've seen a minute ago by Lena already. When we cluster the commons, the expectations, the requirements, how we see them for our research community in Basel, we sort of build those 4 big bullet points. One is flexibility, come to that in a minute, collaboration, digitalization, and ergonomics. These are like the big 4 themes that we try to sort of pin our requirements to, and so work on that each of one individually, to come up with what are the requirements for a new research lab that we want to build in Basel. Now, I'm jumping a story here, and what you see is a floor plan of our building, a single floor of more than 40 floors that we're going to build for that research center. It's about 60 meters wide and 30 meters in depth. So it's quite a huge space, more than 1,000 square meters on a single floor plate. To come up with that took years and here, but I want to focus on a specific aspects. When you look at that space, it's about half of it is lab, which is to your right. You see lab benches or symbols of lab benches, and half of it is where we create an office-like space for preparation of experiments, write-up spaces, as we would call it. Now, further abbreviated, it's lab space or non-lab space. So the lab space, obviously, the space where you do your experimental works, where you have your white coats on, where you do your experiments. Now, what we definitely cannot do is define today how much lab space we will need in 20 years from now. However, the building will be there in 20 years from now. So on the onset, we said, no, we need to be flexible to adjust the amount of lab space that we need over time. And we would have to change the lab floors in an easy fashion to allow for either less or more labs or more office space, whatever side you want to look at from. So we had this modular concept, idealized by these, or symbolized by these little squares, that allowed us to actually change the size of the lab space and the non-lab space in a more or less dynamic fashion, causing us much less effort and pain to do so in the life cycle of the whole building, to allow for things that we do not know today whether they will come or not. Now, the second big topic, collaboration. This picture is the School of Athens in a couple of hundred years back. By that time, it was absolutely normal that you basically learn in groups and that you educate yourselves by communication and by talking together and exchanging your ideas. That is one of the crucial requirements for any research organization, because you want to have innovation, you want to have these new ideas, and communication is one of the key things to find what you didn't look for. In our previous buildings or in our previous infrastructure, we had libraries, and that many of the research facilities do actually have or either had facilities where printed books or print paper was ready to read, and you could go there, you could meet, you could exchange. We also had shared instruments, not only the copy machine, but also when automation was less abundant in labs, you had this 1 or 2 pipetters that you could go, you could ask, you see your colleague that does similar things, and so on. And obviously the coffee corner. That's usually the place where you have most of the non-planned conversations. Now, in today's world, most of these libraries are gone. We're gone paperless. We have all our PDFs of our journals downloadable. We can read them on our own computers, solitary. No need to actually go somewhere, bump into people, talk to people. We can do that. Same fate actually happened to instruments to some extent. They are also often gone because automation in labs has become much more abundant and much more frequent and much more individualized. So you tend to have your own device, your own cell sorter, your own fax machine, your own pipetter in your lab, which is geared and accustomed to what you needed to do at the best. So again, not much chance of going around and seeing people that just used the same machine, the shared machine before. And obviously coffee corners are, I call them endangered species when it comes to space, because as a researcher, you always want to have more space in labs usually. And at one point in time, the physical infrastructure is finite and you need to find another space for another lab. So these let's say communal or these coffee corner spaces and things that we used to have tend to go away and being replaced by individualized labs. Now, with all that in mind, and then talking to the people in our Basel research community and basically going around the world, we had a look in the beginnings of the project. We had a look at more than 40 buildings worldwide. We said one thing is we need to bring back, or we need to actually build in a way that we actually foster communication and collaboration between people, and not necessarily between your bench partner who lives or does the experiment next door, but those who you would not necessarily see in your day's work. So this is a 3D representation of the same floor plan that you saw before. We have the marked green area, half of the floor, which is the lab area, and the yellowish one is where you have your write-up desks and where you would sit. We decided to combine 2, and in the end it will be 3 floors in a package that we would call a neighborhood, whereby the middle one in here marked in red actually has all these communal spaces, its kitchenettes, its meeting rooms, the discussion spaces, the soft seating area, the place actually that you want to meet and bump into each other. And basically the 3rd floor is again a normal lab floor. Now this package of 3 floors, by its size and by the way we build it, will host anywhere between 100 and 140 scientists in a room. And the way we populate it, or the way we think we will have the labs occupied, is not having like 3 floors of medicinal chemistry or 3 floors of oncology labs in one of those neighborhoods, but we deliberately mix them by different disciplines and different functions. So there may be a biology lab, there may be a pathology lab, there may be a chemistry lab in one of those neighborhoods, making sure that we actually enforce the collaboration and communication between different disciplines, disciplines that would not necessarily meet during their day's work. So much about communication. Now, one thing when we're looking into labs, and this is where I'm most involved in, is ergonomics. And this picture illustrates what you would call 50 or 70 years of evolution of a fume hood. And I don't think there is much of evolution in here. So the ViewMod, in principle, the way it functions, the way it looks, is the right-hand picture is a little more modern than the left-hand picture, but it is basically the same. And here is, I think, the long way to go for many of our lab furniture that we have. There is the ViewMod is a nice example that it's been there in its way and shape for years too long. Today, I think we need to have adaptable furniture, tables, hoods, safety cabinets. Most of us actually do work already on height adjustable desks, so you can change between sitting and doing your work on a computer or standing up. Why not making these adjustments and these benefits of modern furniture also go into labs. So whether it is the table or the hood that can adjust to your body height, or the safety cabinet that you sit on, there are people that like to sit a little higher than others, and so on. So we spend a lot of thinking. What is how the lab's interior should look like. One aspect certainly was transparency. If you have large and open labs of sizes of a couple of 100 square meters in places, we needed to have transparency. We do not want to create aisles where you kind of need to step 2 feet outside of your aisle to see whether your next door's colleague is still working or already has gone for a coffee. I want to see them. I want to see the people in the lab and see who is around me doing stuff. So transparency is one thing. Flexibility, obviously, again, we are changing devices and our furniture all the time, and we bring in new equipment all the time. Waste management, that is a topic on its own, especially when it comes to different hazard levels of biosafety level wastes. I haven't seen much of an innovation here for the last couple of years, or last 10 or 15 years. Can we make it easier? Can we make it different? Can we make it to the needs of the actual researcher, and not only to the needs of the SHE requirements of it? And I think there are ways to do so. I'm not yet ready to talk about that, but I think we're heading that way, at least in this project. The entirety of the space that we live in needs to have, or should have, comfortable atmospheres. Well-being atmospheres is one way to put it. If I have 15 biosafety cabinets in a room, all blasting at the levels that are currently built, this is not really a comfortable place to be. It's quite loud. So can we make our devices more silent? Can we have them water cooled for more sustainability? So lots of things that we talked about in the project over the past couple of years. We are not yet ready. We are still talking about some of them. But this is what we heard from our users and from the people that currently work in our labs, how the new lab should look like. Now, one thing Lena also touched upon is digitalization of labs, and there is a difference between digitization and digitalization. While digitalization of the lab is a transformative process, and our take on this is, yes, we need to know where and how we can capture data, and we can digitize it, and we can connect a machine to a server or something. That is the one thing to do. But having it sort of sorted centrally with a unique ID is only half the way to do it. The researcher needs to work with that data, needs to find it, needs to bundle the data of one experiment in one place, knit it together, or have it accessible at the fingertips at any moment in time. And to do that, there is a lot of initiatives on the way already for years, necessary standards, Some of them do exist, Zila, Animal, some of them maybe not yet there. What I think we're only starting as an industry is looking into systems for quality checks and metadata annotation right now. But the essence is we can all talk about big data or deep learning initiatives that are basically the aftermath of having data captured at one point in time, but it needs to be all this getting it together, annotating quality approved, quality checked metadata to our original raw data. That is something where we still have a way to go, and we want to tackle for Lab of the Future. And to do that proved to us more time-consuming and resource intense than we thought, because we're basically matching two worlds. For a software person or a digitalization expert, the software, the code, the workflow, the way data flows between systems and servers and middleware, that is their home turf. What is most of the time not their home turf is how actually a lab works. And so we went to great length to create teams that actually understand where in a day's journey in a lab you actually need to have access to the data, where it is generated, how do you want to interact with that data, how is the human-machine interface to get the data out of the machine into a machine during a day's work in a lab. And we've launched quite a significant project here to actually tackle exactly that little bit between the raw data is created on a machine and it is ready to be stored in a long-term archive to make use of it in a IP creating or value adding fashion on the in the downstream processes of a research experiment. Marrying these two worlds together isn't such an easy thing to do, but yes, we're on our way. We're not yet done, but this is certainly a major value-adding step for a modern research lab to get this data transfer, data annotation, and data capturing, and working with data in the lab, get that right. Now, with that, and being cautious of time, I'd like to stop here with a summary. Even though the term Lab of the Future has been out there for years, I think from my very personal perspective, it still needs to be built. There is still the real Lab of the Future needs to be built for two reasons. A, not everything is ready available yet, and B, it will change and will have to rebuild it again at one point in time. For that, collaboration between all of us on this call, all of us that actually build and create those spaces for working, needs to be between a researcher, between a general planner, between everyone who's involved by delivering parts, making software to it. It has to be a very intense dialogue, and I think also here there is room to improve. For me personally, it's been a learning curve, talking to architects, talking to HVAC planners over the couple of years, because that's a different world, a world I never experienced before, and vice versa. They haven't actually been in a lab or haven't had the experience of us researchers for their previous projects. And to get all these aspects right from a user perspective, we need to work together. We need to work together and really invest time, invest money, invest all our brains that we have, and take the courage and willingness to actually create the Lab of the Future one day. So with that, I'll basically hand back, stop the broadcasting, and yeah.
Thanks a lot, Achim. That's great insights, especially to the new Roche Pirette building, and much more of it we will see on the 2nd of March next year. We have a special slot only about the new Roche Pirette building, and we will look to that project from different perspectives. And you are also on board on March, also Geo and another colleagues. So we are looking forward to March to feel more and know more about the building. Thanks a lot, Achim.
Yeah, looking forward to March too, and yeah, I'm more than happy to share even the detail that I needed to jump over right now.
Thanks a lot, Achim, for the insights.
Achim, there are a few questions in the chat box, and I think basically two questions go hand in hand. First one would be, what influence does COVID have on working at Roche? What were the biggest challenges in that time? And the second one, and I think we can combine those, what does COVID mean in future, especially for building, design and layouts? So basically, as you see, a lot of interest around the topic, how COVID actually impacts your current project and also your attitude and your view on facility design and layout in future.
Yeah. So maybe there is two aspects on it. So one is the lab aspect. So when we went into lockdown in Switzerland, there were obviously regulations and like persons per square meter in a lab that are allowed to work together. As lab work is essential for a research organization, we still continue doing lab work. You can't do lab work in your home office. But the size of our existing infrastructure, which is quite dated, basically was a bit odd, because 10 square meters per person, and basically you had like 2-person max working in a lab that was designed once for 4 persons. So in here, I think over the past 18 months, we learned how to deal with that, and we fixed that. That was an immediate measure for the Pirette Center project. For the new trend towards open and larger spaces. I think the new spaces or open space design is easier to handle in that respect, because you have multiple ways to manage distance restrictions or things like that. So I think for a new lab, once we move in there, or if we had moved in the new Pirette Center 2 years back, it would have been easier for us to manage it. Mm-hmm. Lab work is not changed through COVID, so you still have to do the same experiments that you would do without. Now, talking about the office spaces, I think now as we are opening up a little bit and people start coming back, and you have these mixed environments of virtual and in-presence meeting, I think that is something we need to talk about when it comes to open office spaces. Currently, there was a well-defined ratio as how many open office spaces require how many quiet booths. Right now, it is with all these semi-virtual meetings or mixed meetings, there may be a demand for more quiet booth type locations. We will see how that develops. Luckily, again, for the Pirette Center and the project I've been working on for 5 or 6 years, it's a modular concept, and so basically putting in a wall is not that much of a deal. We don't have to tear down the building, but this new normal, as it is sometimes coined, is obviously, it will be a challenge for the open office environment, and solutions still to be found.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay.
Great. So I would say the third impulse from my side, I make it really quick. It's about how can we integrate this future topics in our labs, and we designed a process for that, and I want to share an online whiteboard with you. Just a moment. So yeah. Great. I hope everybody sees an online whiteboard. You can't read something, but you see it. And this is an online whiteboard. We are working on that whiteboard with our customers for future-orientated projects. And we have different modules there. We have, I zoom a little bit in, we have, like today, we have an impulse to open the mind, to talk about the specific topic, what's going on in the world, specific to the customer project. Then, very important, the next module here is the analysis, to understanding all the insights from the customers. The next module is the ideation process. So together with the customer and the project team, we create a common vision. And after that, perhaps we make concepts and we are looking to technology, building processes, and so on. And then we hand it over to the planning team. That could be a lab planner or an architect, but then we have the phase 0, and everything is, we defined everything. So let's look to the details. So this is the process, and every information is on this board. So you don't have any drives or files or some information somewhere where you can't find that. Every picture, every text, everything is on this whiteboard. So it's really quick, this process. It's really fast because you have all informations you need. You can look forward and backwards and have everything on your desk. So I zoom in now a little bit. Normally, after the impulse, we bring all the project informations. You see that here on that board. That can be drawings, photos, videos, and descriptions. Everything we need from facility side or from the area. Then, and this is a very important thing, we define a project team with the customer, and it would be perfect if in the project team there's a facility manager, normally the lab users. That's really important, perhaps also a manager. The most important thing is that there are the different perspectives in this project, because we only have success at the end when we involve all the people at the beginning of the process. So we have the project team we define, and together with this project team, we make the whole process. And this process is based on design thinking. So it's really creative, it's open-minded, it's not only efficient, it also makes fun. And a small example is here, for example, together on the online board, we define the project goals together with the project team. And my colleagues, Lena and Max, are also there. You see the cursor of them. And in a small session, we can say, okay, what's important? What are the must-haves? What are the nice-to-haves? What are the dream-to-haves or the no-goes? And then we can write on the sticky notes and bring all these topics. Here we discuss and we bring it to the quarter where we say, okay, this is a nice to have, the other thing is a must have, and so on. It's really quick. So I take the pink one here. You can write, I write here, and then we bring that to me. And then in a short time, we have a landscape here, all the targets from the project team. And now I zoom out. That's only a small example. And after that, that's really important, we define a user survey. A user survey to an online user survey, and we make different persona. In design thinking, it's called persona. So we have lab manager, for example, we have supervisor, we have technical employees, and perhaps another group. And then they have to fill out this form online. and then we will have the results after that. And perhaps we also look to the lab. If there are labs at the moment, the project team can make photos. They upload these photos here. We comment that is really good, that's not so good, and so on. Perhaps we can also go on site to watch the labs, and then we know a lot about the labs and also the users. And then we look to the results, an understanding board. For example, we have an overall view from the analysis. So, for example, we look to the working mode laboratory. We see, okay, all the employees, they spend 2.5 hours in the lab. And what are they doing in the lab? Focus work, dialogue, teamwork, and so on. This is a typical result from such a project. And also when they are in the office area, for example, here 6 hours in the office area, only 2.5 hours in the lab. What are they doing in the office area? Focus, dialogue, teamwork, and so on. What are the happiness factors here? And this is also often background noise because because of the equipment which is standing in the lab. And this, these are the top 10 of the happiness factors. Also, office activities and other things we look to, and much more in detail. It's really interesting to look. Okay. How is the lab manager working? What is a typical day from a lab manager? And also from the supervisor and the technical employee. You see it here. For example, the lab manager is only half an hour in the lab and he's talking much, and focus work is really less. In the office, he spent over 8 hours, a little bit focus, everything a little. And the supervisor is not so far away from the lab manager, but the technical employee, for example, he spent 50% in the lab and in the office, and when he's in the lab, there's much focus work. And these results are really important to design the right working place in the office and also in the lab, and also the mix, how big is the lab and how big is the office. Achim, you showed in your presentation, okay, flexibility in the new period building. Perhaps we need more lab in the future and less office, or in the other direction. So we should design that very flexible, and you see that's really important to know exactly how is the working day from a lab manager, from a supervisor, technical employee. What do they need to work very good with focus and teamwork? What spaces do they need? With which division do they collaborate? And which is also the development of the employees. From now on to the future, what does that mean? How many home office in the future, for example, so we know how many people will be on site. That's some examples. Important to know the analysis is really important. So, and then we go to the ideate process. And in the ideate process, we involve experts, internal experts from the company, Waldner experts, but also from our network, from our worldwide network. When we discuss about digitalization, we have an expert from that, and so on. Then we make really short impulses, and then we discuss. After the impulse, we decide, and then the next step. So it's really efficient. And here you see a small example. Also, how we design such a space. And Lena and Max, you're here in the board. I zoom in a little bit, and now it's really fast. In the first step, we make a zoning concept. So all the project team members can say, okay, in my opinion, that would be, for example, a good zoning model, office here, lab here. And the other one is, for example, no, I want a marketplace in the middle, for example, and the lab, the general lab, a flexible lab in the front here, and special labs here, for example, here. And then we also can bring ready modules here to say, okay, that would be a good structure. We need 10 meters of labs, for example. We need a meeting room in the office here. I copy another thing. Here we have also ready modules, and you see we are really fast. And in the group, normally we make different variants and have great results. After that, we vote and say, okay, this is cool, this is great, this is not so good, and so on. And then we have an optimal version very quick. So I zoom out. And then we make a prototype, the architect, or we make a rough prototype from the results, like that, for example. And then we make also feedback rounds, and so on. And after that, perhaps a concept process. So we talk about building topics, more building topics, technology, process, all the things. We have experts, we discuss and decide, and after that we define all requirements. We have a summary of all informations for a planning process or a planning competition. And we work on this online board. It's really cool, it makes fun, and it's really efficient. And another important thing is also the communication and change from the very first beginning. We should make, if it's a bigger project, we make a communication roadmap and plan. We talk about which is the target group of the communications, what formats do we have in the company, and then you see on the right side, here's a roadmap. So we say, okay, when we reached milestone number 1, we inform the top management with the online meeting, after that division management with the Q&A session, and so on. And with milestone 3, for example, we make a big webcast. We bring that to the company screen, to MS Teams channel, to Yammer, and so on. And after that, for example, when we transform the art of working, we make workshops with the users to train and to make these things. So that's also an important thing, the communication and change. And then we can, with such a process, we can realize big projects very quickly with the project team, and the results are normally really cool. And the most important thing is that's much of collaboration. It's a project team, and from the beginning on and at the end, it will be successful because the project team was there, also the lab users, from the very first beginning on. Okay, that was a small insight to a collaboration tool and how we can integrate the trends in our labs. You can write your questions in the chat. We can answer that. Now it's a little bit open-end. It's 13 o'clock. We are finished. Everybody who has to go away, thanks a lot for joining us. On the 3rd of November, we have the next Labcafé online about incubators and accelerators. And I look to the chat, and there's a question to Max. So there's a question, which differences do you see between Europe, Asia, or the United States according the future labs and future topics?
Thanks, Alex. And look, I guess overall the difference is not so much how the labs look like, it's more about the speed how those projects are taken on with, right? So we see lots of planning process in Europe or in grown economies, while here in Singapore or in China for that matter, many of those projects will be started and finished within 12 months, say. And the Roche Accelerator in Shanghai is a great example where within 12 months, basically from PI to finalization, the project is being built. And I think overall we have global topics, they're very aligned, but it's the speed of how they are brought to action that differs quite a bit. And I find that the most striking difference. There's another question in the chat that I just see. The Roche project in Basel is a project that is being built at the moment. It's under construction. It's not built yet. It's in Switzerland, in Basel, and I think open for visits in what, 2023, Achim?
Well, we will move in 2020, end of 2023, beginning of 2024. After that, there's certainly a chance to go and see it. Right now, it's a construction site.
And I guess worth mentioning, it's one of the biggest construction projects, one of the biggest lab projects anyway, currently going in the world. It's in front of schedule. Is that correct? Ahead of schedule.
We are absolutely on time with ours, despite COVID and all the other impact that the last 18 months brought. Yeah, we are on time.
And a fantastic, absolutely fantastic construction site. We're in the middle of Basel with currently, Achim, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 800 to 900 people working on site at the moment, parallel in COVID, in the middle of Basel. So this is a tremendous logistic and intra-logistic concept behind that.
It is worth admiring the group of people that does that. Yes, it's a couple of hundred people every day.
Only in Switzerland.
A regiment of who uses the elevator when, and so it's a huge thing. I admire the guys that putting that into place. The one exception, or the one thing, when we looked at 40 buildings roughly around the world that were pointed to us as the best research centers worldwide, before we started that project, it's one of the only high-rise buildings. There's very few high-rise buildings for laboratories in the world, and we are basically our highest lab is beyond the 100-meter mark. It's on the 22nd floor. It's got a nice view of Basel as well. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, and again, thank you so much for your insights. Hey, there is another question in the chat, which I think it's quite interesting and also very valid question in that context. Someone asked, how do you see Roche's approach of the lab of the future? Does the Period Center lead to a global strategy of R&D for Roche, or will the setup still be a more regional, traditional approach? So basically, the question would be, is the intent to really streamline also lab standards for Roche globally, or is that a more regional approach?
I think it's so the best answer would be Georg, because he has been involved in the Shanghai project and in all the other projects as well. I think the answer is a mix of both. So the general high-level approach to it, being the transparency, being it the modern digitalization approaches, the ergonomics of lab equipment, they are obviously they should be true for the entirety of the world. There are, however, regional differences by the type of work you do, when you do the work, the size of the institution, and also a little bit about the history of where you come from as an organization, what the culture is about, and that does ultimately also shape the design of the futures. I think it would be, personally, I think it wouldn't be a good idea to take the exact same building that we have constructed in Basel and place it somewhere in a totally different culture. Probably you would have to make it adaptations here and change that to some extent.
Right. So as long as Alex is muted, I just unmuted himself. I'd like to thank everybody. See any other question in the chat. And as I said in the beginning, it's not supposed to be a Waldner event. It won't be in the future. Today, we kind of wanted to present what the plan is for the Academy, what the topics are that we will touch on, what I guess also the kind of journey we do throughout the world, and how we take care of labs and how we take care of labs design, and how we can, I guess, give and provide impulses for the first phase, before the first phase. So I guess from my side, I'm looking forward to the next few sessions. It's going to be good. We have a good journey planned, a few curated speakers that are in the wait list for the next events. And thanks everybody for attending. Thanks very much, Achim, for sharing the insights. Stay tuned. Waldner Academy will be good.
Thanks a lot, Max, and greetings to Singapore. It's in the evening in Singapore, and thanks a lot for everybody. Thanks a lot, Achim, also, and we will show you the QR code from the next Academy event, and see you in November. Thanks.
See you then. Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.